Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Foróige Future-Proof Climate Justice Conference. My name is May Weir. I'm 17 years old and I'm from Leitrim, and I have been involved with the E-Collective for just over a year now. We are a youth group advocating for climate justice through our podcast series, our monthly conferences, and the training programs that we've created. And I'm really delighted to be your host this morning. We have a great audience today joining us online from all over the country, so a big hello to all of you. And we are about to hear from experts and young people on the theme of modern living and sustainable lifestyles. So I hope you're all settled in for the next hour. This morning's event is all about creating a space dedicated to hearing what we as young people have to say about climate justice, with some very special guests along the way. This is our time to learn, reflect, and grow together towards a better future. So now, to open today's event, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, Roderic O'Gorman. Minister Roderic O'Gorman was joined by two of our E-Collective members, Tara Farn and Dara Flynn, earlier this week, where they filmed a very special and important conversation. Dara and Tara got the opportunity to ask Minister O'Gorman questions submitted by young people in Foróige.
Hi, my name is Tara Farn.
And my name is Dara Flynn.
And we're from the Foróige E-Collective. Thank you so much for having us today, Minister O'Gorman.
Absolutely delighted to have you here and looking forward to having these questions from you.
So what sort of teenager were you? Would you consider yourself to be an environmental person from a young age?
Actually, when I was in primary school, I got really into environmental issues. I suppose I grew up kind of outside Mulhuddart at the kind of the edge of the city. Then it was all very much country back then, all fields. There was actually a farm beside me when I grew up. It's all quite built up now, but just living out there, you got into nature, like you know, there was animals, there were badgers, there were foxes and everything around, and my parents, we used to take me out walks, and that got me really interested in wildlife. And then in 1992 my mum got me out canvassing with Trevor Sargent, who was our local Green Party representative at the time, and he got elected to the Dáil that time, so that's what kind of brought me into politics. I suppose when I moved to secondary school, maybe did a little bit less. So secondary school was very much kind of took up a lot of your time, but certainly then once I went on to university, then I got much more involved with it again.
Who was your climate action hero?
I think probably David Attenborough, I think would be someone. From even when I was very small, I remember his programs on wildlife really they absolutely captivated me, from whether he was doing elephants or if he was in a termite mound somewhere. He was he just showed the kind of the variety of wildlife on the planet. And I suppose back then his focus was very much on the animals and biodiversity and that, and now he's kind of gone on a journey in terms of the much bigger focus now on climate change and its impact on all these populations. I think even he recognises some of the things he was doing in the 60s and 70s in terms of, you know, capturing animals, bringing them to zoos isn't acceptable now. But I think he's just there as a voice and as someone who's listened to as such an authority on the environment and on what the damage that humans are doing to it.
So why do you think it's so important for young people today to lead the change in climate justice?
I suppose from a selfish point of view, it's important for young people to do something about it, because your generation will bear the brunt of failure. You know, all the targets that are set out in either the Paris Agreement internationally or here in Ireland in our climate action plan, they use 2050 as a key date. So no, what age are you now? You're 19, so look, in 2050 you'll be kind of in your early 40s. You might be, you know, thinking of having a family. You'll be like well into your career at that stage, and you will have to deal with either the success of this generation in terms of turning the tide, in terms of getting control on our carbon emissions, getting a control on global warming, or you'll have to deal with the failure. So I think every young person has a vested interest in ensuring that my generation and the generation above me deliver on climate action now.
How is the new climate-focused budget introduced last year panned out, and has it met your expectations?
It did, yeah. I think you've seen, certainly here in Ireland, a huge focus on active travel and giving people the option to walk and cycle to work or to school or to college. And I think that's a huge part, because we know in Ireland we're incredibly reliant on the private car. And some people need the car, and that's fine. But for tens of thousands of people, walking or cycling could be an option if it was safe and if it was easy. And we know, and anyone who's travelled around Europe knows how bicycle unfriendly the streets of most of our cities and towns are compared to most other European cities. So that investment now, and we're seeing it, I was up along Clontarf there over the weekend, and just seeing the amount of reserved space. Even you were saying you go to DCU now, out there along Collins Avenue, those dedicated bike lanes that have been put in, they weren't there 2 years ago, and hundreds of people cycle to DCU every day, and it's about making that safer. So I think that's just one example, but better investment into public transport, using the money that comes in through the carbon tax to retrofit homes, particularly for people maybe living in social housing, and also using that money to put it back into the social welfare system to ensure that maybe those who are less well off don't kind of take the brunt of the increase from the carbon tax. So the budget was designed in a way to kind of recycle and target money at the actions that will make a real difference in terms of reducing our country's climate emissions.
So we do have a couple of lighthearted questions here we do want to ask you. So what do you think is your most unpopular opinion? Like, for example, we were actually chatting outside of this today, and we're on about where we kept our food. So some people keep their ketchup in the fridge, or their bread in the fridge. So what would your most unpopular opinion be?
I remember my nana always used to keep the bread in the fridge, so she'd give me these really cold sandwiches. My most unpopular opinion would be, I think, I like cereal dry. I think putting milk in cereal is absolutely revolting, making them soggy. So I like my cereal dry. I understand I'm in the minority, maybe in the minority of one on that, but yeah, no, it's something I die for, dry cereal. Yeah.
Not sure I can agree with that one now. I think the question on everyone's mind right now is, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
I suppose it's not very original, but I'm a big fan of the old oak. I try and grow oak saplings back at home. I've got like all various sizes of ones in pots, kind of with roots bursting out. But I don't know, I suppose it's such an association of a tree, an Irish tree. But also, if you ever just get the opportunity to go to some of the properly old oak forests in Kerry or other parts of the country, they are just amazing, just the way they completely blot out the sun. It's like a completely different ecosystem that they create, and it's just something really magical about being kind of in the middle of an oak forest. So yeah, that would be my tree, I think.
So what are you looking for in your next role in government?
Do you know about a reshuffle or something that I don't know about? I am very, very happy in the job I have right now. I'm so lucky in terms of having just been elected for the very first time in February of 2020, and then 5 months later find myself a minister sitting in cabinet. I still have to pinch myself sometimes to think, here I am at cabinet. I used to teach constitutional law over in DCU, and I used to teach people about the executive and the government and the cabinet. Then I found myself in it. So that is an amazing experience. But this department is fantastic. There's such an opportunity to deal with some really difficult issues that have been kind of around for a while and not addressed, like direct provision. As you know, we're going to end direct provision. We brought in the white paper to do that, like dealing with the issues coming from the mother and baby homes, so making sure adopted people have access to their information. So there's a lot of long-term issues that our country maybe hasn't addressed over the last decades, and I have the opportunity to do something about them now, and that's what I'm really focused on doing.
What are you most proud of in your role today, whether it be as a minister, as a TD, or earlier on in your political career?
I am proud of the fact that we brought forward the white paper to end direct provision. It sets out a plan on replacing direct provision with a much more humane system for people who are here having their asylum application assessed. Now we have to deliver it, and I'm aware that, you know, it's all nice to set out the plan, but delivery is what I'll be judged on. I'm proud of how Ireland has kind of stepped up to the crisis in Afghanistan at the moment. We've offered over 450 Afghan citizens refugee status here immediately, taking them out of incredibly unsafe situation now that the Taliban have taken over. We've offered it to women, people who are working in NGOs supporting women, LGBTI plus Afghan citizens, citizens who are journalists and the like, so people who are really at risk from the Taliban takeover. And look, at something, you know, it's small, but, you know, last 2 years I've been able to put additional investment into youth services as well, and that's something that's positive. I've seen, both from the research we've done, but also from my engagement since I took up this role, I've seen the difference that youth services make across the country. I wasn't actually involved with any back in the day, but I've seen the huge impact it can have, and want to be able to grow it and give more people the opportunity to access youth services, be they the targeted ones or universal.
So what was your initial spark that ignited your interest in joining the Green Party?
As I was saying to you earlier on, you know, my parents weren't really interested in politics at all, but they were very much telling me about the importance of the environment, and not, you know, not cutting down trees, not seeing animals being killed, and I suppose that's what inspired my vegetarianism later on. And when I found out that there was a political party that kind of the environment was its central idea, I was just like, yeah, that's the one for me. So as I said, I was very young when I first got involved. I was 10 when I first went out canvassing, and I've always stuck with the Green Party ever since. Yeah, just its ideas on the environment appealed to me, and as I grew up and kind of formed ideas about other things as well, its ideas on, you know, social justice as well as environmental justice, its ideas on equality, all just absolutely appealed to me.
I think that about wraps everything up. Thank you so much, Minister O'Gorman, for having us here today.
That's great, guys. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Yeah, no, at all. It's great to have you here in the department.
Thank you so much to Minister Gorman for taking the time to chat to Dara and Tara and answer all of those questions. Well done, Dara and Tara, you are complete pros. Now it is my very great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Neeve Shaw in conversation with one of our eCollective members, Orna O'Brien. Dr. Niamh Shaw is an Irish engineer, scientist, writer, and performer. Dr. Shaw believes in dreaming big and is on a mission to get to space. Neve's passions include sustainability, being climate conscious, and igniting people's curiosity in STEM, art, and communication to share the human story of science.
Hi everyone, my name is Orna O'Brien. I'm 16 years old and I'm a member of the eCollective. I'm very happy to be joined today by Dr. Niamh Shaw, and today she's going to have a little chat with us about her journey so far. So you're very welcome, Niamh.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, Orna.
No worries. So if you wanna, we can just get straight into questions.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Perfect. Okay, so let's skip backwards and let's think about your childhood, and let's have a chat about what was kind of the first thing you can remember being kind of climate conscious. You know, it was something that was good practice.
Well, you know, I grew up in the 70s, and you know, there wasn't nearly as much waste then as there is now. There wasn't as much processed food. Food is more expensive, so you know, my mum would make everything from scratch. So we wasted nothing. You know, you reheated food the next day. My clothes were mainly hand-me-downs from my brother and my sister. I don't think many clothes were bought for me. I was an avid reader, but I didn't own many books. I went to the library a lot. I didn't have a huge amount of toys. The toys I had, you'd kind of get for Christmas, and then other than that, you wouldn't really get many toys. A lot of our jumpers were knitted by this woman up the road. She kind of had a knitting machine. We homemade. We played a lot with boxes, with a lot of imagination. We'd be outside the whole time, climbing trees and making up kind of worlds out of our minds. So you just were naturally living with nature. You were just always sort of outdoors, running around, and any possessions that you had, I didn't have many. So I wasn't aware that was called climate consciousness, because that's just how everybody was at the time, you know. So
Yeah, I know. Definitely nowadays we're just so piled up with stuff. We all have stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what is something that you think nowadays is clearly very different to how you would have grown up? What's one simple thing that you do to kind of continue doing climate conscious stuff in your day-to-day life? Whether it's, having a reusable water bottle or something similar to that.
I don't own a car. I hire cars as and when I need them, and I use public transport or my bicycle as much as I can. I've given away all my possessions. The only stuff I own now are clothes. I buy my clothes in a sustainable store. All my clothes are secondhand. This was made by a designer whose all her stuff is organically and environmentally friendly. This was a gift from her. But my trousers that I'm wearing at the moment are came from a secondhand store. All my clothes now, I don't buy, apart from like underwear, I don't buy anything new. Like I say, like I live in an apartment. I'm kind of nomadic because I really believe that it's the only way I can kind of keep that feeling that I can get up and go at a moment's notice. That's for my own kind of career in terms of as a kind of a space journalist and a communicator. But actually, I just really felt I owned stuff and I didn't need to own stuff, and I didn't like it. It kind of weighed me down. And now I can go from place to place. I pack a bag, I pack a case, and I can go anywhere in the world. And that's a really nice feeling. And that's how I try to stay as climate conscious. But I'm not perfect either, Orna, because a lot of what I do requires travel. So for me, it sort of feels like I'm redressing that in a way, because I definitely do contribute in that way, because I have to travel the world and I do have to occasionally hire a car. So how I kind of balance that out is I don't own stuff, I don't own a house, and all my stuff that I buy is secondhand.
Well, I think that's, most people would travel a lot and wouldn't be aware that they need to counterbalance it. I think they call it your carbon handprint is the stuff that you do to reduce your carbon footprint, which not having a car is a big one.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't have, I think for families, you have to have a car because you have to have young babies and they have to have car seats and stuff. But me on my own, it's too much of a luxury. And so you've got these facilities now where you can hire a car by the hour, and there's, in the cities where there's public transport, that's all I use.
Yeah. So you are an engineer, and last week we just had Science Week has just ended. And what was one of your biggest takeaways from that week?
Well, I'm very tired. My work still continues. I just came from Dundalk. I was just working there with TYs. We created our own live stream show, which was a review of everything going on with Science Week, and just only kind of reviewing shows that matter to them and interviewing them. And we just finished that. We did it every day this week, and that was very rewarding because I feel like in my work, and I would say in some of the work that I see on the ground, we're not really listening to teenagers a lot, particularly in events, making events, and finding new ways of communicating science. So I saw that gap after I kind of studied science communication there last year, and this year I made it a point of whatever I was going to do, I was going to try and work with TYs and not come in with a solution to what we were going to make. I let them lead it. So this is what we made. We made a 30-minute review of Science Week every night at 5 o'clock this week, and I worked with 2 schools in it, and it was hugely rewarding. And what I learned from it was that we need to listen to teenagers more, that you're very you are smarter than you are led to be believed in the public domain, and you should have more say in the future running of this country, but also in the future running of your education, and also around mindfulness and all the soft skills as well as the hard skills. So that's what I learned. I had a hunch that would be true, and it has been proven, and I'm going to be doing that in future.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed working with teenagers, because it's always nice when people come back with a positive experience of working with teenagers. Yeah.
Well, I had to build your trust. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy.
No,
you don't just like let anybody in. I had to earn it, and I like that. I like that I earned it, so that when I do actually have the relationships that I now have with both of those schools, they mean more to me, because I know that I've earned the right to have those relationships, but also that it just takes time to kind of tune into each other. And now, I'm really proud that that we were interacting the way we were over the last few weeks. It's been lovely.
And I'm sure you must have been such a positive influence for anyone in those schools. So, which is why it leads me to my next question: is who would have been one of your biggest influences, either growing up or even still now?
Well, I had two really amazing teachers in school, and well, three really, actually three, for different reasons. One was my English teacher, Sister Louis Mary. She was just amazing. She wasn't a nun like a classic nun. She refused to wear the habit. She was always talking about falling in love, and she was a real creative. And she was one of the first people who really could see my writing ability and encouraged me to write, and brought out the artistic and creative side of me. She took me to my first ever art gallery, which was in Paris on a school trip, the Musée d'Orsay, which I go to every time I visit Paris. And then Mrs. Greer was my chemistry teacher from 5th year all the way up to Leaving Cert, and she completely reinforced my passion for science, and she insisted that I submit a project for the Young Scientist, and hugely positive in terms of like reinforcing that I am good at science, and it gave me huge confidence. And then the third person was a very young teacher called Miss Dorr, because she was the first teacher that allowed me get to know her as a person, and seeing that teachers were humans too. That was a massive thing for me. So the school was a very, very positive experience for me, and I had some really great teachers as role models.
Well, that is really encouraging. I'm sure any teacher who's listening is like, oh, I hope that's me. I hope some kid thinks about me like that.
Yeah.
So I heard from little birdie that you have big plans of going to space one day. So do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that it was a big part of my life as a child. I absolutely adored space and science fiction, and I still do. But when it came to kind of the stage you're at now, I didn't think that someone like me could possibly have a career in space. And that was because there was nobody around me who had anything to do with space. So if you don't see it, you can't be it. And it was when I've had a big career in science and engineering, and then I moved into a creative career, and I started kind of combining the two, that the passion for space sort of came back, and I wasn't as afraid, whereas I had been in the past afraid to try because I was afraid I was going to fail. Now I was in a different headspace, and I thought it was going to be just something creative, but it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the desire has always been, from the age of 8, has always been to see the Earth from a distance. It's not about being an astronaut or being perfect or superior. It's about seeing that view. And in combining all the things that I am, which is the engineer and the scientist and this writer and this creative person, I've learned to kind of be, what I do well is that I'm able to talk about science and space in a way that doesn't feel intimidating for people who aren't interested in science or space. So that's the role that I want to have when I go to space. Is I want to be brought up as a sort of the best way I can explain it is like a communicator in space, like the official communicator in space. And I want to go up for like a 2-week mission and experience it, and then find ways of explaining what it feels like to people. And not like at big events, like in schools, working with TYs, in small towns, in villages, like all the people who don't yet know about the value of space. So that's the dream. And everything I do now is about that. So every Science Week is a big part of that. Every time I report on a launch, or anytime I go to a launch or go anywhere related to space, it's all about proving that I can be this communicator in space. So that's the dream. And it's really funny. I remember in 2011, when I was making my first theatre show, I realized how much space was important to me. And if I knew 10 years ago where I'd be now, I would say, like, I don't know why it took me so long, or why I worried so much. It's amazing when you allow yourself to just let the dream that you have breathe. It doesn't have to become a huge drastic decision overnight. You just have to give it space, that it kind of just grows naturally, and people want to help. That was the thing I didn't expect, how much people want to help me. So I pinch myself sometimes about how lucky I am with the life I now have compared to where I was 10 years ago.
Well, that is nothing short of inspiring. So in terms of actually getting to space, I know there is some stuff about it that it's, it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of fuel, for example, to get there. Do you ever think that there will be kind of a more sustainable way to do it?
Well,
Like,
it's
do you think
already,
we have the capacity?
yeah,
We have
absolutely.
the capacity to make it
Oh
more
yeah,
sustainable.
I think so, because some of the rockets already are the fuel is hydrogen, and hydrogen doesn't have any emissions at all. So the rocket that William Shatner went up. So William Shatner is a guy who was an original character from Star Trek. He went up in a kind of a space tourism launch there, must have been about a month ago, and that's made by the head of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, his company Blue Origin, which is a space company, and their rocket is reusable. It goes up and then it comes down, and the rocket, its fuel is hydrogen, so it leaves no carbon footprint whatsoever. So there are smarter and smarter solutions coming up, and a lot of the rockets are the reaction of hydrogen and oxygen. And so, when that reacts, you get water effectively. So you get water out of this explosion. So there are ways that we can bring emissions down as much as we can. And I think what I love about the space sector is that all the solutions that we need to change living on this Earth have already been solved by space, because the second you leave Earth, there is no oxygen, there is no water, there is no food. So space is the actual volume of spacecraft is absolutely, like, it's thousands of euro per cubic meter. So they have come up with very smart and sleek and efficient solutions to water filtration, to recycling, to living minimally. All of the answers that we want about adapting our lives to be more energy efficient and more water efficient and more recyclable are in the designs for spacecraft.
It's mad that you have to, leave this Earth's atmosphere to find our answers.
Well, that's it. You see, put yourself in an extreme environment, and you'll get answers pretty quickly, because suddenly the value of water changes radically when it isn't on tap, and food and energy and oxygen. So, I know this from the simulated Mars mission that I was involved in. Water just became the most valuable thing. And I never forgot it. It's why I live minimally now. I never forgot the experience of living in a desert for 15 days when everything is that to keep you alive has the highest possible value.
I can imagine it would be difficult to forget that.
Yeah.
So we cannot ignore the fact that you are a very present female figure in the world of STEM. So I know anyone who could be listening or finds this clip later might be wondering, a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of a push, any kind of advice you'd have for anyone, and also anyone who's interested in writing as well.
Yeah. I think, I think sometimes the way STEM is presented is that it is this book of knowledge, so it's something you do as an exam, or, you're going to do biology, so I have to study. I would say that you should see science and technology and engineering and maths as, I see it as kind of like a toolkit and like an attitude to anything you see around you. So you have makeup, say, for instance, or you have a hairdryer, or you have a nice set of lights that you have around your bed, or maybe you have nice jewelry or glasses or a nice TV or a nice phone. There is engineering and science behind every single one of those things around you. We can't function in this world without people making things, and anything that's made has to be designed and it has to be figured out, and there is maths behind it and there is engineers behind it. But not only that, to try and understand color of makeup, or how to make liquid makeup, that's all in a solution. There's a scientist behind that, but also there's a science behind color. The lights that you have around your bed, say, for instance, that requires electricity, which needs wiring, which means you've got an electrician. An electrician is technical and they know how to do that. And somebody somewhere made it, which means it's in a factory, which means there's engineers. So anything around you, your phone, there's a huge amount of technology around it. So wouldn't you like to know a little bit more about how it works, so that when it goes wrong, you can fix it? But also, if you know more about it, you've a better chance of staying on top of technology, or having a say in the future direction of anything, of the makeup that you want to wear, or the clothes or the cars that you have. So STEM it's just a way of understanding how the world works around us, and you can choose to have a career in that, or not. You can just choose to learn about it, you know, and just understand how your phone works or whatever. And then around writing, all I would say is that if you feel this desire to say something, find out the way you like to say it. Do you like to get up and speak? Do you like to draw pictures? Do you like to take a picture? Do you like to make a video? Or do you like to write? All of those things are forms of self-expression. So sometimes a photographer will take a picture because he's trying to tell you, I'm still in love with my ex-girlfriend or something. We may not know that, but he knows it. Somebody else may actually write, I am still in love with my ex-girlfriend. She's amazing. She has red hair, blah, 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 blah. Somebody else might want to make a video reenacting the moment they broke up. Somebody else might want to write a poem about it, and somebody else might want to paint about it. So writing is just a form of expression. And as all artists will tell you, the only way you can get better at it is to keep doing it. But also you should feel a sense of release when you do it. So if you have something to say, you have to get it out. So whatever form of self-expression you want, it has to come out. So it could be it could be writing, it could be poetry, it could be photography, it could be standing up and having a speech or something. But it's just a form of self-expression. You'll never, you won't be immediately good at it, but that's not the point. The point is that you have something to say, so just say it in whatever way you want.
That's a brilliant answer. I think that is, yeah, it's great. I love the way that you said that STEM is like a toolkit for everything else in life. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of final question.
Okay.
It's a bit of a more lighthearted one.
Okay.
So if you didn't have anything stopping you, like no lack of oxygen or extreme temperatures, which planet would you most love to explore?
I get asked this a lot, and I think, well, there's kind of a new one now, but I'm kind of in love with Saturn. I think Saturn in our own solar system is just the most beautiful thing. The ring. I don't know if you've ever seen Saturn through the telescope. It's
not through a telescope.
It's kind of mad because Saturn to me feels like kind of science fiction. You know, it's that shape that always you see in cartoons, or you know, you see it as sort of it sets the tone that it's like a science fiction movie when you see a planet with those kind of rings around it. But we went to I was at a stargazing event there for Culture Night at Burgh Castle, and a load of astronomers came and they set up the telescope for the moon, which is also absolutely stunning in a telescope because it's so up close. And then you see Jupiter, and Jupiter's lovely, and you see the moons either side of it. But then when they show you Saturn, you're like, because the rings are so clear, and it's like a cartoon or something. I can't believe that that's in my night sky, even though I know technically it is. I never tire of seeing it, and it's really, really small because it's really far away. And if I could kind of, I have this notion of like gliding through Saturn and kind of just touching my hand on the ice, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of gliding and you're going, you know,
almost
it's kind
like
of like
water.
Yeah, like kind of water, or you can kind of, you know, that it's like a flow of sand or something, and then you go, you can kind of change the. I'd love that. And then the other planet I'd love to see is the planet that was recently discovered outside of our galaxy, because there's loads of planets that have been discovered orbiting stars in our galaxy, like billions of them. And now they have evidence that they've actually found a planet that orbits a star outside of our own galaxy. So I'd like to go to that one if it was possible, but neither are possible. Saturn would take about 13 or 14 years to get to, but the other one is impossible. Yeah, I'd love to go to Saturn.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world, Orna. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I absolutely enjoyed talking to you today. It was great fun.
Thank you.
And we all heard some fabulous stuff that I think we'll all take away in our own lives. So from everyone on the E-Collective team, all my members who are listening, we'd like to say thank you and best of luck in your dreams and your space travel future. So thank you, Niamh.
Thank you, Dr. Neeve Shaw and Orna for such an inspiring conversation. Now, as mentioned before, today is all about creating space for open conversations. We took part in a conference pre-event on Wednesday, and it was an amazing opportunity for young people in Foróige to come together and to explore the future of climate justice in Foróige and what we can do both individually and collectively. Finlay Thompson and Ella Concannon have joined us this morning to tell us about the outcomes of those conversations.
So, hello everyone, I'm Finlay Thompson, I'm 16 years old, I'm from the NYP Youth Project in Northwest Donegal, and I'm also a member of the Foróige Collective.
And I'm Ella O'Donoghue Cannon, I'm 17, I'm from Dumore Foróige Plus in Galway, and I'm also a member of the collective.
And today we're here to tell you all about the discussions we and other young people in Foróige had on Wednesday night at the conference pre-event. So since the start of the collective, we've been really clear that young people's voices are at the heart of everything and that Foróige does on climate justice. So for this year's conference, we wanted to have a dedicated space for young people to come together and consider climate justice specific to Foróige young people and how we can all take a stand. So some of the questions we asked young people were, how climate justice is a part of Foróige, where we are right now, what we're already doing, and how young people involved. The responses from the groups were really clear that Foróige has an important role to play because we all have to do our part to help protect this planet. So it is an integral part of who we are. Foróige is a youth influencer, and through this we can educate and influence young people and adults. So what can young people in Foróige do to support climate justice and take action? Well, it's really important that we educate and raise awareness among other young people. Youth themselves are also influencers and can spread the climate justice message. We have the power to bring other people with us and create collaborations and partnerships like many other groups in Foróige are already doing. But it's also important that we do what we can, such as cycling or walking, instead of taking the car, making sure we reduce, reuse and recycle, and do our best to make those small changes in our daily lives. Over to you now, Ella.
Thanks, Finlay. One of the other questions was, so how about when it comes to Foróige as an organisation itself? This could be the adult staff and volunteers who are involved. Firstly, it is so important that Foróige continues to take the lead on climate justice among young people and give the space to share their ideas and beliefs with each other. Foróige can help to support young people to undertake climate action projects in their local communities and can spread the word and encourage greater participation. Events like this one are really important so we can create awareness and celebrate everything we are achieving. Young people also said it's important that we show our commitment to climate justice as an organisation and be visible. And this is something that we are working on. The last question we asked young people was, what is the most important thing for you that Foróige should be doing on climate justice? Some answers here included trying to reduce, reuse and recycle, and go paperless where possible to save the trees. Young people also mentioned how important it is to focus on small changes we can all make in our lives, using public transport, cycling or walking more. And finally, the most important answer from the night was to try and create as much awareness as we can with other young people and to be more active and take action in our own communities. We had amazing conversations on Wednesday, and we are so thankful to all the young people and staff who took part, and to the two groups that joined us from Corduff and Balbriggan. Now back to you, Finlay.
Thank you very much, Ella. So we've taken all this feedback away to help us shape the next phase of climate justice in Foróige. Make sure to keep a wee eye on us because you never know what we'll be up to next. Now back to me.
That was brilliant. Finlay and Ella, thank you for joining us this morning. And now I'm so excited to introduce you to the next segment. Tara and Geraldine from the Use Less project are here with us this morning to chat about all things sustainable fashion. The Use Less project helps people take steps towards more sustainable living through tutorials, workshops, tips on food waste prevention, reuse, secondhand and upcycled fashion. We're so happy to have them here to teach us a few tips and tricks to prolong our wardrobes.
Hello! Oh my God! Future Proof Climate Justice Conference. We are Taz and Geraldine from the Useless Project, and we're so excited to be with you for the next 10 to 15 minutes to talk about some of our favourite ways to engage in the circular economy, which comes in the form of upcycling.
Yes, this is going to be a whistle-stop tour of the problems associated with the fast fashion industry, the solutions surrounding the sustainable fashion movement, and then a few fun kind of hacks and bit of inspo when it comes to upcycling your wardrobe.
So I am just going to share screen here so that you can see our presentation. Hopefully you will. Where are we? We are here. Are you ready?
We are here, we are live, and we are ready to rock.
Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that. So before we start the conference, or not the conference, you're at the conference, our talk, I suppose we should give you a little bit of a background on who exactly we are.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, we are Geraldine and Taz, and we started the Useless Project, which is formerly Sustainable Fashion Dublin, back in November 2018. And our whole idea was to try and make the prospect of sustainable fashion and engaging in the movement as accessible and as appealing to as many people as possible. So we originally did that with charity shop crawls and upcycling workshops and talks and sewing classes and anything and everything we could think of to get people involved in whatever way we could. So we merged all that online with the arrival of COVID-19, and we've got lots of tutorials and kind of informational deep dives on our Instagram page at the Useless Project. Shameless plug for anyone who's interested to learn a bit more. But from there, we'll chat on now about the actual topic at hand.
Yes, so we are going to give a bit of a crash course in upcycling, which is a great way to avoid fast fashion. But we thought before we go into that, we should let you know exactly what fast fashion is. So fast fashion is kind of this blink and you miss it speed at which apparel is being created today. It's kind of been around for the last 10 to 15 years. And essentially what it is vast quantities of clothing being pushed through the market, sold to us without any care or consideration given to the planet or the people who are actually making our clothing. 2 seasons of fashion have become 52 seasons of fashion. So what used to be spring, summer, autumn, winter has now become 52 seasons of fashion, and fast fashion houses are putting out new lines every single week. In doing this, they're kind of making us believe that what we own is already out of style, because what happens is we can go into a fast fashion outlet and we can look at the mannequin, and the mannequin can be dressed in this gorgeous t-shirt and shorts and tights and boots, and it's on trend. That is what's in style, on the money this week. So you buy that outfit thinking, wow, I should be on the page. I'm the bee's knees. I should be on the pages of Vogue. I'm in style. I'm ready to go. And unfortunately, you go into the same shop 2 weeks later and the mannequin is dressed in something completely different. The clothes that you bought are no longer on the shelves, which is sending this message or making you believe that, oh my God, what I bought is already out of style. I need to buy more. As a result of that, we're buying more and more and more and more and more. We own 4 times the amount of clothing that our parents owned, just one generation above us. So to try to put that into context, I think it's always easier to try to imagine these things. Imagine a wardrobe and then multiply that wardrobe by 4. That's how much more clothing we have compared to the generation above us. And the reality is we just can't afford, the planet can't afford to have that multiplied by 4 once again for our kids, the generation below us. The average item of clothing is only worn 6 times before it's thrown out. And you have to remember, a huge amount of resources go into making this clothing. Water, chemicals, labor, carbon emissions. Every single item of clothing has damaged the planet and the people who are making our clothing, whether we like to believe it or not. For it only to be worn 6 times before being thrown out, it's so unsustainable and so unethical. Every second of every day, the equivalent of 1 big bin lorry of clothing is sent to landfill or is incinerated, which is really problematic for the planet and, again, just wasteful. So what about the human cost of fashion? Unfortunately, we kind of like to forget, I think, that our clothing is made by people. We kind of think of it being in a faraway land and we just get the clothing on our shelves and we wear them right as rain. But the reality is every single item of clothing has touched human hands. There are people at the absolute base of the fashion industry making our clothing. The Rana Plaza collapse that happened in 2013 really shone a light on the bad practices of the fast fashion industry. It was this plaza in Bangladesh that was making clothing for well-known fashion brands, and it collapsed and 1,113 people died in this factory that was making clothing for us. So literally these fast fashion outlets are kind of like sitting by while this kind of destruction is happening to human life.
So that was the dark side of the fashion industry. And I get to talk about the bright side, which is the brighter, more positive alternative, which is the ethical or the sustainable fashion movement. So from the get-go, I'm going to kind of clear any preconceptions you might have had about what it means to be more ethical or sustainable with your practices. I think a lot of people might have assumed that you have to have a very chunky wallet. You have to be able to afford €200 organic cotton shirts or €400 organic trousers. And that is a very inaccessible prospect to the majority of people. But and then there's the other side of things, and people might assume that, you know, the sustainable fashion movement is all kind of encompassed in beige, shapeless, gray dresses, you know, kind of potato sack skirts and trousers made out of granola. And really, no, that's not the case at all. What we're talking about is clothing that has been created in a way that values and respects every part of the production and supply chain. It's investing in quality, not quantity, but also engaging in the circular economy, which I want to talk about a little bit down the line. So you can just see here, this is the kind of considerations that we want to see brands making when they produce clothing, looking at everything from how the clothing is being designed to last, what materials are being used, how the people are being treated who are actually making the clothing, how the clothing is being transported, how it's going to be disposed of ultimately at the end of its life. So it's a much more of a 360 approach as opposed to the linear model that we're seeing with the fast fashion industry. And then I suppose from the perspective of the consumer, it's about shifting our priorities and recognizing that there are, as has mentioned, you know, individuals, communities, and environments at the heart of our clothing production, and they deserve to be respected just as we deserve to be respected. Because at the end of the day, getting access to the hottest trends at the click of a button, it's not some kind of fundamental human right, although people feel like it is these days. You know, clean drinking water, fair pay, humane working conditions, access to education, and freedom from child labor. These are key fundamental human rights that are being denied to people so that we can have cheap clothing. So we'll always try to hone in on the fact that the easiest, thriftiest, and most effective way to be sustainable with your wardrobe is to engage in the circular economy. So that's literally buying clothing, that's already mentioned, that's made to last, and wearing it until it's down to its last possible fibers. And if you're sick of it, or maybe you don't want it anymore, passing it on to someone who might like it, or bring it to a charity shop, or maybe the reason why you're not wearing an item of clothing is because it's got a rip or the button fell off. It's learning these key basic skills to sew back on and to mend it so that you look after it and make it last longer. Because the longer we can wear an item of clothing, the more we decrease its individual carbon footprint.
Well, look at that for a segue.
Seamless segue into upcycling, which is all part of the sustainable fashion movement. It's adding a bit of color, creativity, and personal flair into your clothing, because I think people might assume that we hate clothing and we want people to walk around as nudists, but no, that's not the case at all. We actually love clothing, and we think that it can imbue so much more than just bare fabrics. And it's a great gateway into creativity.
Woo! So we are going to go through some of our favorite upcycles that Geraldine and myself have done over the past couple of years, in the hope that you may feel inspired, that you may leave this talk, open up your wardrobe, take out a dress that's been lying at the back and think, I'm going to turn this into something that I want to wear every single day. Yeah. So the first example is this black Guna that I got in a charity shop. And I am not usually a person who wears black. I am big fan of loads and loads of color, as you can probably tell by the blue glasses. But I really like this dress. And I knew that I wanted to do something to it, to wear it more and fall in love with it more. Also, the bottom of it was quite stretched out. Obviously, it had been pre-worn, it had been pre-loved. So the previous owner, obviously accidentally or otherwise, just through wear, stretched out the bottom of it. So I wanted to do something like that, do something about that. What I did do was go nuts with some embroidery thread. Geraldine and I always say that if you are not amazing at sewing, or you're not as confident in your embroidery sewing abilities, use really, really thick, bright thread, and then all the stitches kind of just look intentionally messy, if that makes sense. So on this black dress, I covered it in loads of different really simple stitches, tutorials for which you can find on YouTube, no problem. Running stitches and zigzags and French knots. And then I cut up along the side of it where it was stretched to make it look like that the kind of rip or the wider base was intentional. I love this dress so much, and I wear it as much as possible because I know that nobody else owns it. Nobody on the planet has this dress other than me. And because of that, I'm going to care for it. I'm going to look after it. I'm going to mend it. And yeah, I just love it. Look how delighted I am.
She is thrilled.
Also, look how tanned I am. You'd know that this was shot in the middle of summertime. But yeah, there's my dress. Love it so much.
So this is my little version of embroidery. So I'm a very messy eater, and unfortunately I had this shirt that had been at the back of my wardrobe for months and months because it had a stain that just would not come out of its collar. And so past me probably would have just thrown it out eventually and been like, oh look, I'm not wearing it, that stain is just not budging. But no, the new me would never do such a thing. And so I decided instead of throwing it out, I would cover up the stain with a bit of a gorgeous embroidery. So again, really, really simple stitches, like pretty much the most basic that you'd find. We've got a tutorial on our Instagram page, but I wanted to add a bit of kind of creativity and quirk to a collar. And so I made it into a bee. Who doesn't love bees? And now it's actually my favorite shirt. I've got a lot of shirts, and I never don't get a compliment whenever I wear it. And again, it's just adding that kind of personal story to an item of clothing. I get very sentimental about clothing.
Now, if you're not as confident sewing or you're not ready to pick up a needle and thread, you can do amazing things with painting denim and other materials. We use acrylic paint, but you can also use material paint and loads of other kinds of paint and materials. You can find, again, tutorials on YouTube, or if you look at Pinterest for ideas, they're amazing. But paint is a great way, again, to cover up a stain or to completely transform an item of clothing that you're no longer wearing. If you have a pair of jeans or a t-shirt or a shirt, you can essentially turn it into whatever you want by the addition of paint, or with the addition of paint. These are a pair of white shorts that, again, I got in a charity shop for Electric Picnic for a festival, and I just went ham with some black paint.
Strong Picasso vibes.
Strong Picasso vibes. Very, very simple. I know that kind of like some of maybe the snake is a little bit more I was going to say professional. It's definitely not professional, but as someone who has painted a bit, but like most of it is just dots and stripes and triangles and circles that anybody can really do. And again, much like my dress, I wear these so much and I always get complimented on them far more than if they were just plain white shorts.
So another thing that's worth bearing in mind, if you've got, say, a dress that you're like, oh, look, I never wear it anymore. It doesn't excite me in any way. Add some pockets, because as we all know, pockets make any dress or skirt 400% better. Statistically, it has been found. So I did a tutorial, I think this time last year, on how to add pockets to a dress. Really simple, very straightforward. And again, now I love that dress. It was something that I hadn't been wearing for a while, and now it is back in the limelight, and I love it.
This is my favorite upcycle. I think Geraldine's may have been her pockets. This is my favorite one. It's an old duvet cover that I bought in a charity shop. Again, where else do I buy my clothing? And I turned it into a two-piece. I love this two-piece so much. And again, like, it's whenever I wear, people are like, wait a minute, is that a Buzz Lightyear two-piece? But it's just to show you what can be done. You know, even if you are starting off in your sewing journey and you want to go out and buy material and thread and all that kind of stuff, check out secondhand first, like duvets, sheets, pillowcases, curtains, all of those are essentially squares of material looking to be used. And this two-piece, it looks kind of difficult, but again, I just followed a tutorial on YouTube. Like the shorts are literally elastic around the waist. They're almost like a pair of like GAA shorts, you know. They're really not difficult to make, and with a little bit of practice you can definitely do it. And look in the charity shops, because they have some really funky duvet covers.
And there's loads of resources online, we're always saying, but a few of our favorite accounts on Instagram in particular are Studio Minty. She is incredible, the thing she does, the transformation she makes from one item into something completely different. The same to be said for Louisa here. She actually was one of our winners we did a big competition for upcycling clothing from charity shops. So definitely to watch. But if you look up the hashtag upcycled fashion, there's things like that. There's such a variety and selection of accounts and inspiration out there that's definitely worth checking out.
These again are two of my favorite upcycles. On the left hand side, that was just a long pink skirt that I chopped off the bottom and made a top out of. Literally took off the bottom and added straps to it. So as simple can be. And on the right hand side, a white jumpsuit that I went, again, kind of Picasso vibes, I would say, and went with some primary colors, and it's like my go-to festival outfit.
When in doubt, go Picasso.
Yeah.
So now this is a story that again is a lot more kind of sentimental, and it's trying to encourage you to see the value in clothing and see that it can be so much more than bare fabrics. So the example being my mom and her wedding day. Strong Diana vibes. She was a big Diana fan, and she was an original sustainability queen. Didn't even realize it, because she didn't want to wear her dress once and then let it fester away for years to come in the attic. She decided to cut it down to be the size of a communion dress, which me and my 4 sisters all wore on our communion day, and then that wasn't sustainable enough for her, so she cut it down again, and now it is being worn as a baptismal dress for all my nieces and nephews. So it's lovely to see how an item of clothing can actually turn into almost like a family heirloom, if you just imbue a bit of care and creativity into it.
Absolutely. So then this is our final one. It's an upcycle that I did and used natural dye. Natural dye is an amazing way to change an item of clothing completely. Loads of different ways. Turmeric can dye yellow, avocado stones can dye pink, cabbage can dye blue. Look it up, because it's really, really amazing.
Yeah. So that's us. That was our whistle-stop tour of sustainable fashion and upcycled fashion. And I hope that you got something out of it and you might be a little bit more inspired to do something else and look at your wardrobe a different way and see how you can tweak them to be more you and more creative and let those creative juices full flow.
Yeah, so we're Taz and Geraldine from the Useless Project, and we really, really hope you enjoy the rest of the Future Proof conference.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks so much, Tara and Geraldine. I'm definitely going to tackle my wardrobe later on and try out some of those tips. Next, we have something very special coming up. Here with us this morning, we have Shauna Gilbride, who will be interviewed by Sarah Aiken from the E-Collective. Shauna was a previous member of the E-Collective and has continued to live her best sustainable lifestyle now that she's moved on to college. Now over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for the introduction, May. So hi everyone, as May has just said, my name is Sarah and I am a current member of the E-Collective, and today I will be talking to Shauna, a former member of the E-Collective, about her sustainable lifestyle. Shauna, thank you so much for coming on to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me.
I have a few questions for you. So how do you live sustainably in college and what challenges do you face?
Well, I think like anyone, when they think of college, it's always, you're skimping and saving, it's a money thing. But other than that, it's kind of, I've been living the same as normal. Like I've been making my changes, such as metal straws, using beeswax wrap, which is just fabric with beeswax over it. My bamboo toothbrushes. I think, just the small changes really, the same as they were before college. The only thing is that I'm just not buying as much food maybe. So in some ways it can be harder that, sometimes I have to opt for the plastic option. Whereas with like, if you're buying a pepper, you only have to buy one pepper so you can stick it in your own reusable bag as opposed to having to buy 3 and have it in plastic. Or like swapping clothes with my friends, sharing clothes. And that's just like things, even from a non-sustainable point of view, like you want to save a few bob and you're only going to wear, especially I know with girls, with going out, we tend to only wear things once or twice and then it's like, oh, well, I'm done with this. So you're like, okay, you have this top, I'll take that top. So yeah, I think it's just an extension of what life was like beforehand, but I have a bit more control over it and I have to think about my own finances a bit more.
Absolutely. Do you try to encourage your peers to be environmentally conscious?
Yeah, definitely. Like whenever I can, I do, be it whether they're asking what something is, or I know I had a question about my natural deodorant and does it actually work, and like things like this. And I'll always, share whatever knowledge I have, or like share the sites that I use or the people that I follow, and stuff like this. I definitely encourage as best I can, but sometimes the interest is not there, and that's not for me to try sort out.
And how do you combat people who react negatively to your message?
I think a good example was when I first moved, or when I moved back to Galway. A new housemate came in and they saw some of the like reusable, the metal straws and bits sitting around, and they were like, oh, who's the big eco head? And I was just like, oh, that's me. And they were like, oh, okay then. And I kind of just, like if they don't have that interest, as I said, I'm not going to push, I'm not going to be an absolute like, oh my God, please do this. But I will, of course, be like, ask people to rinse out the milk bottle and let it dry before they chuck it in their recycle bin, and stuff like that. I'll do what I can to help inform, but I'll if they're not interested, they're not interested, I suppose.
Did your time as a member of the E-Collective have an influence on you to live more sustainably?
Yeah, definitely. I think like majority of the stuff that I know now about sustainability and about climate justice, it's all stuff that I would have learned or researched more as like during my time in the collective, and just like different things that I didn't know, like wrapping paper is not recyclable, and I learned that through something we were researching or looking up for my time in the collective. So it had a huge impact on like how I think of things and just my view in general on sustainability.
And have your family taken on any of your sustainable habits?
Yeah, definitely. My mum more so than anyone, I think. She was wrapping my birthday present and she was like bragging to me about how she had reused the packaging that it come in, say, or like the brown paper that comes to protect things, that she'd wrapped with that. And I suggested to my family for our Christkindle to all use newspapers from my granny and granddad's because they throw them out every day. So we all wrapped in newspapers and we didn't have this huge black bag of waste that had only been used once. So we'd obviously given the newspapers new life, and everyone thought it was a great idea. And I think we're going to continue doing it from years to come. Like,
God, no. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to me today, Shauna. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that we have learned so much from you, and I can't wait to incorporate all the tips and advice you've given me into my everyday life.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
And now I'd like to pass you all back to our wonderful MC for today, May.
Oh, that was just amazing to hear from Shauna again and about her journey so far. Thanks, Sarah, for asking all the important questions. Now, last but certainly not least, we are absolutely thrilled that the chairperson of Foróige's board can be here today, Ms. Barbara Daly. Barbara has been on the following eCollective's progress since the beginning, and she's a big fan of the podcast and has been working on sustainability with the members of her own Foróige groups in Gallen and Farn for a number of years now. A huge welcome to Barbara Daly.
Thank you. Can I begin by thanking the eCollective for the invitation to attend the second Climate Justice Conference. And to you, May, our MC for today, congratulations. That was an exemplary manner in which you've conducted the conference. Thanks also to the members of the eCollective for your participation, and indeed to all our contributors at this conference. Dara Flynn and Tara Fannin, Sarah Aiken and Orna O'Brien. Your professionalism in conducting interviews today is second to none. And to Finlay Thompson and Ella O'Donoghue Concannon for your comprehensive report from the pre-conference consultation. To Minister Roderic O'Gorman for his commitment to giving young people a voice. And to the ever-inspiring Dr. Neeve Shaw, and of course not forgetting our former eCollective member, Shauna Gilbride. Can I commend both of you for the quality of your contributions, which have added enormously to today's event. Thank you also to Tara and Geraldine from the Use Less project, a particularly timely and relevant contribution in relation to fast fashion. And speaking of fast fashion, like Niamh Shaw, I was born in different times. I was born into a rather large family at a time when, however in fashion one might be in Ireland, depended entirely on how fast one's older sibling outgrew an item. The education system at the time then was concentrated on skills development, even at a primary school level. Knitting, sewing and basic cooking were very much a feature of primary school life in 5th and 6th class, though I will say it was only for girls. And I will admit that I lost every battle in an attempt to knit socks, mittens, or that horrendously bright pink cardigan. And I still have absolute nightmares about hemming the daisy-covered red cotton A-line frock that a nun forced me under duress to make as a 12-year-old. Because given the choice, I'd have been much happier to be out turning or footing turf on the bog. Though I will admit that, in retrospect, that was a far less sustainable set of skills. In that much less affluent Ireland of my youth, the skills I mentioned, they were sometimes a necessity, but they were practiced by families from every socio-economic background. Darning holes in knitwear was commonplace, changing the buttons on a coat to give it a new lease of life, turning the collar on a shirt to extend its life by an additional year. That was the norm. Now, least you imagine that my generation was living in any form of deprivation, or what Niamh Shaw called living minimally. Rest assured, our needs were met and our wants were few, because the materials we used were generally sourced locally. They were of excellent quality. The local tailors and dressmakers were artists in their own right, and the end product stood the test of time. Indeed, I still have in my possession the graduation dress that my oldest sister designed and made for me in 1978. I didn't forget to put out the wash. That's the graduation dress hanging here behind me. As I say, it was designed and made in 1978. So if the collective have any innovative ideas for what might become of this particular article, I'm all ears. So when you look today for sustainable solutions in what has very much become a throwaway society, the blueprint for sustainable living already exists in our own social history. Among the records from my own Macratuha Foróige club, I have correspondence in an application form for members to take part in the RDS Country Show scheme in 1966, where members were required to knit a jersey in their own size or produce a piece of embroidery, a wooden toy or a rush basket. Now, I'm not naive enough to think for one moment that in order to tackle the neglected environmental impact of rampant consumerism, that we can suddenly just erase 60 odd years of socio-economic development, or that we can just revert to simpler times. That's not how it works. But what each of us here today can do is to ask ourselves, what are we prepared to do as individuals in the collective interest of our society? What small, inconvenient, uncomfortable change are we prepared to make in our own daily lives? Are you willing to forego your want, to sacrifice your want to wear the popular labels or the latest high street fashion? And am I willing to wear the same outfit to 2 consecutive family weddings? Can either of us learn, relearn, or use basic skills, as mentioned earlier, to extend the life of clothing or basic household items? Is that a risk worth taking? Is it a sacrifice worth making? We need to ask ourselves that. And if not, what is the alternative? Because we as consumers are responsible for how this story has unfolded. And we are responsible for how it ends. Each personal choice we make or don't make has an impact that goes far beyond that simple transaction of exchanging money for goods. I commend you for your activism, but climate activism requires action. And not the type of action that involves finger pointing or blaming or demanding from the other that they do X, Y, or Z. It's action from the individual to make personal changes and sacrifices. Because without these, it's not activism, it's mere theatre. I made a passing reference earlier to turning turf. And as we sit here this morning, the COP26 is in overtime, as are we. As some of the richest nations do their damnedest to avoid committing to the ending of the use of fossil fuels and the cutting of greenhouse gases. Now, neither you nor I have a direct line of influence with world leaders and policymakers in these monumental changes. But what we do have is the power to change our own energy consumption, to pursue alternative new and sometimes not so new practices in our own personal and daily lives. Before I conclude, can I express my deep appreciation of all the staff and volunteers who have supported the E-Collective for the past year, and in particular for their work in bringing today's event to us. I also want to acknowledge the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth for funding this initiative through the Youth Climate Justice Fund. Remembrance Day was on Thursday of this week, when the world recalled the sacrifices made by those who fought in 2 wars in a collective effort to save the world from the worst excesses of humanity. Now your generation is also being called upon to save the world from the excesses of humanity. Though focused on ethical commemoration and remembrance of conflict, I think the words of President Michael D. Higgins in Speeches for an Ethical Republic can equally be applied to the challenge and opportunity that lies before you in seeking a more sustainable future. When he said that this is an opportunity to consider how Ireland has been and must again be renewed through memory and imagination. In that task, we are invited to go beyond what is calculable, what is even seemingly reasonable. We have the opportunity to move along the arc of a historic encounter. And I wish you well on your endeavours along that arc.
Thank you, Barbara, for your continued support and that stirring speech. Well, that's it, folks. Time flies when you're having fun. I hope everyone is feeling really inspired after hearing from all the amazing speakers this morning. A huge thank you to Minister Roderic O'Gorman, the Use Less Project, Dr. Neeve Shaw, Shauna Gilbride, and Barbara Daly. Also, thank you to all of you eCollective members that took part this morning. Finally, don't forget to check out the first episode of our second season of the Future Proof podcast series, which is out today. Available on all podcast platforms, this episode is on the theme of agriculture with a special guest of Saoirse McHugh. Definitely go check it out. I absolutely recommend it. I hope everybody has a great day, and thank you so much for logging on, everybody. Bye for now.